Welcome to Community Conversations, and I'm your host, John Tansey. Today we have as our guest, Windsor County Sheriff Ryan Palmer. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate it. I saw some of the earlier episodes. Gina's was kind of a favorite of mine so far, and I'm glad that you asked me to be part of the show.
Well, great. I hope we can learn a little bit more about you, your ties to the Windsor area community, and your role as Windsor County Sheriff today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we start at the beginning? Can you tell us about where you were born, raised, grew up?
Well, they tell me I was born at the Mary Hitchcock Hospital there in Hanover. I don't remember it for some reason, but grew up in Windsor. My parents, Lisa and Pat, Windsor residents, grew up here. And my grandparents on both sides, longtime Windsor folks. My great-grandfather, Henry Harlow, used to work at Bud's gas station, I think, into his 90s. Yeah. So my grandfather, Wayne, on my mother's side, was the bartender at the American Legion for, I think, 30 years. Both my grandmothers, my grandmother Marcy on my father's side, she retired from the hospital. She worked up there as an LNA. My grandmother, Jean, I want to say, again, 30 plus years at Mount Scottney Hospital. She was a phlebotomist, and I think a lot of people in town really preferred to have her draw her blood, So some deep roots to Windsor there, and grew up, my childhood here, went to Windsor High School, played sports, football primarily. There's no John Tansey, but, played a little football there. My sister's a teacher in the school, and I just love this town. I love this community. Obviously, I'm on the select board as well. Second stint on the select board. Did that when I was much younger. Back probably 2007, 8 maybe, I think it was.
We were on briefly together there for a bit.
Yeah, and I was pretty young, but I think this is going into year 4 probably for me, back on the board. And I'm sure we're going to get into this, but I kind of jumped into police, or got a very early start into police work. I think watching, some of these old movies, Clint Eastwood and RoboCop, all these silly things with my grandmother back in the day, and fast forward to when I was about 16 or so, I had a neighbor across the street who was a policeman here in Windsor, and let me do a ride-along. And I was kind of hooked from 16 on, and started my career at 19, and here we are. But I'll let you ask some questions. And
well, just going back, weren't you involved in through the school and the police department had some sort of mentoring program?
Yeah, that's right. So kind of a thing that we kind of concocted, kept me out of in-school suspension or detention, I guess, But Chief Byron DeMond, who is very near and dear to my heart, God bless him. Byron allowed me to do some ride-alongs, a cadet program we called it, precursor to some things that were stood up later on. But during the day, during school, I get to go, I'd spend an hour or so with Byron, did a lot of things at night, even had my own little uniform. They had me do security sometimes at, like, overnight at Moon Dance, I think it was called then, precursor to our Autumn Moon Festival. And it's a phenomenal experience. I got to see a lot, experience a lot, be part of a lot very early on, and gave me some insight to a career that I've really dedicated my whole life to.
Well, you've clearly have strong ties to the community. Many of the names you mentioned, I know your relatives and people, and they've again been very active throughout the years.
Went to school with your children, played football with your son, all that.
Yeah. So it's been great watching you and them grow up. But we'll talk more about your role as sheriff and your other community ties. But what are some of the things that you do for fun? Outside of your role as work or in select board and so forth.
Yeah, this is always a tough question for me, because when I stop and think about it, I realize that maybe my work-life balance is not as equaled out as it should be. But You see my vest here. I'm really enjoy golf. Got into that a couple years ago, and that's one of my primary things. I haven't really been able to do it as much as I wanted this year, but I love playing golf. Just bought a new mountain bike, so I'm hoping to kind of get into that a little bit more. Spending time, and then spending some time when I can with my grandparents. My Wayne and Jean live right up the street from me. I have a young niece and nephew, Tucker and Kennedy. I think they're 6 and 4, and realizing that it's very important to spend time with your family and things. So I'm trying to balance that out more and be more engaged there. But yeah, when I think of like, hey, what do you do for fun? Man, golf's at the top of the list right now. If you saw me play, you probably wouldn't think that, but hey, that's how that game goes.
I can understand that. I got a used set of golf clubs for Christmas last year, and I've used them 2 or 3 times. So challenge to get out there, and it's even more of a challenge when I'm on the course. But
for sure.
So I think you probably were a little bit ahead of me.
Well, we won't put any money on it. Let's put it that way.
So have you always lived in Windsor?
Yeah. So like I said, grew up here my entire life. I've had some different times where I ventured out a little bit. I lived in Chicopee, Massachusetts, working for the Department of the Air Force for a while at Westover Air Reserve Base. I guess that's an important part that I kind of left out. I'm a Iraq and Afghanistan veteran with the Air Force, so I joined the Air Force Reserve. I was 18 years old, out of Chicopee, Massachusetts, as a reserve unit, and deployed to Iraq with them. Came back, switched units, ended up with the Connecticut Air National Guard. It's kind of a long story, but ended up with them and deployed to Afghanistan. So there's been some different times. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for a while, for about a year, a little over a year, but primarily living in Windsor area.
Was that, I remember you were on the select board with me for a short period of time. Was that just, did you go into the, were you called to active duty around that time?
No, what happened then, well, yes, actually, but I had a job that I got hired at the Canaan, New Hampshire Police Department, and they had a requirement I had to move.
Okay.
I had to live in Canaan. And so that kind of ended, as a toss-up. Do you take a job, or do you work basically this volunteer government position? And obviously at that point in my life, it's what I had to do. I had to move. So I wasn't able to stay on the board. And that would have been an 07 time frame. And 08, we were gearing up. In 08, I deployed to Iraq, September of 08, got back kind of January, February-ish of 09.
So that's one question I wanted to ask you is what types of professional experience do you have before you became Windsor County Sheriff, and what kind of, and you've mentioned some already, are there others that you were engaged in before you've taken on this role? Yeah,
so, and when we talk about the role of the sheriff, right, I think it's important to kind of highlight really what that is and how it differs, and then how that experience ties in and helps me with that. So a sheriff is an elected department head. It goes back to 1781, so it's a kind of antiquated, constitutionally, we're a constitutional officer, so we're in the Vermont Constitution. We date back to 1781, and we're elected, which differs a lot from the state police colonel or municipal police chief who's appointed by a board, right? So I'm elected every 4 years, and we in Vermont, it's unique how we operate, but we're basically a small business. We have very little county funding, so there's a big aspect of you have to run a business. But we also can contract our law enforcement powers out. So I have contracts now with 15 municipalities, a couple, school district, all sorts of different things that we do. So there's a big component of law enforcement. We also serve civil process. So if somebody's getting sued or divorced or owes money on something, we have to go serve that process. We might have to take something back. So that's a whole section there. And we have about 35-ish sworn law enforcement officers that work for me, a mix of full and part-time. We also provide security in our courtrooms. So we provide uniform law enforcement security in the Windsor County courts, which we have 2. Well, right now we have 1, but there's a criminal court generally in White River that's under renovations, and then we have a civil court in Woodstock. But because of just the way of the world and staffing and all these things, we've branched out. I'm helping out Washington County. I have 3 or 4 deputies there, depending on the day. Orange County, we provide some contractual law enforcement in 4 towns in Orange County, and we provide 2 bodies at the courthouse for security there. So it's a very diverse organization. So go back now, okay, well, we've kind of established that. What does my professional experience look like? I started out with, my father is self-employed. He's had his own business for 30-ish years now. He's an electrician. And I started at a very young age helping him out. At least I thought I was helping him out. I don't know how much help I was at,
I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, exactly. And so it really kind of instilled a little bit of that work ethic, right? Although my teachers at school would say that work ethic didn't, exist, but we won't go down that road. Yeah. And going from there, I became a DJ at a young age, 12 years old.
You still DJ some?
No, John, no. I'm retired.
Oh, okay.
Anyone out there says, hey, I got a wedding coming up or a party? No, I'm retired.
Okay.
Please, I can't do it anymore. But, we talk about connections to the community.
Yeah.
Jim Taft, longtime Windsor football coach, our facilities director over at the school, was playing music at his son's birthday party, Tyson's birthday party. And for whatever reason, I was kind of drawn to that and was up on stage with him. He's playing, and 12 years old, I got into it and started DJing dances, all this other stuff, learning how to interact with the public and speak and do all these things. And that sounds, well, how does that really translate? But when you think about a big part of my position is a politician, right?
Yeah.
And you need to understand how to speak publicly. You need to understand how to entertain people to some aspect, right? So moving forward, I ended up working retail at a right down the road here at the old Goodyear building. There was a guitar shop, and they sold music equipment. Denny Coleman, the music junkyard. There's some folks out there will probably remember that place. It was really cool. And so learning a little bit of business. But again, customer service, because I think law enforcement, at the end of the day, it is truly a customer service oriented business. So my first real professional gig, then I actually left school early, dropped out of school, ended up floating around a little bit, got my GED, ended up at a place called Hesser College in Manchester, New Hampshire. Did a semester there that would have been the second part of my senior year in high school. That summer, I go to the Air Force. My specialty in the Air Force was emergency management. So it's kind of a mix in the Air Force of like chemical weapons and nuclear weapon defense, and that FEMA aspect of disaster preparedness, disaster response, emergency management. So learned a lot in the 10 years that I did that, and was exposed to phenomenal type trainings. Moving forward, 19 years old, I get hired, 19 years old, get hired by the Department of Corrections, worked about 6 months at the Department of Corrections at Southern State in Springfield. When you're that young especially, and you're in a correctional facility, a state prison, you learn how to talk with people, and you learn how to interact with people, because it's just you and 50 inmates locked in a facility. So moving forward, I get my first cop job in Claremont. Again, I'm 19 years old. My first week on the job, I turned 20 the end of that first week. And my first FDO, Bill Wadsworth, Bill was hitting his 20-year mark, and he was going to retire. So I thought that was an interesting piece. So bounced around different police jobs, back to corrections, all these things. I took a job in Kentucky for a little while. I was the head of like corporate security at a warehouse production facility for a British company, and ran the security team at that facility. So a lot of different things. Came back, worked at I worked in the Windsor Police Department for about 9 years, I think. Then worked, my last police job before I ran for sheriff was the Ludlow Police Department, and a lot of different training experience along the way. It was a very convoluted, long-winded answer, but I've done a lot of little different things.
And you had a business here in town, too.
Geez, John, how do I forget that? So I was the owner of Back 40 Guns and Ammo. We stood that up in 2011, end of 2010, opened in 2011, ran that for 3 or 4 years, and that was a great time, fun experience. So yeah, owned and operated a business, and I think that all those little pieces helped me in this current role that I'm in.
Great. You've talked a little bit about
A lot of it, not just a little bit.
a little bit about the sheriff role, but no, it's great to hear, because you always wonder what it is that kind of people bring with them to, like, your role is a very prominent one as sheriff, and what was your path there? But you've you've been sheriff for 3, 4, going on 4 years. Is that it?
So elected in November of 2022. In Vermont, you take office in February. So February 1st, 2023, and I think we're at about 2.5 years into it now. Not quite. Well, no, 3. Well, 3 years from the election, about 2.5.
So what have been your priorities, and then maybe you could talk on a couple of what you see as successes and what some challenges have been as sheriff.
Sure. So my priority coming into this was that I saw that there was a vacuum as far as law enforcement service in Vermont. Just the way Vermont State Police has kind of pulled back a little bit. There's been this ever-increasing need of law enforcement services in this state. And it's a whole much bigger conversation. We don't really have the time to get into it, but I think everybody out there can, in some way, shape, or form, feel that there's been an increase in need in law enforcement. And I saw that there was, and felt that there was really a need to change the way we do rural policing in Vermont and really shift that paradigm. And that was my main focus. I took over an agency that was solely focused on the generation of revenue through traffic enforcement to essentially pay towns to then be paid to provide traffic safety enforcement. And I thought that, with the complexities of crimes and the increasing significance and number of crimes that we're dealing with, I saw that we needed to do something different in Vermont. So I took over I inherited about 11 deputies. We had basically traffic enforcement contracts in 8 towns across the county. And I've touched a little bit, I'm up to probably 35 sworn. And, they might have done a case where somebody had a criminally suspended driver's license. And we've done everything from, like I said, handing out candy at Halloween to working with the feds on kidnapping cases, serious felonies. We're involved with the Special Investigations Unit. So serious child abuse and sex assault cases, we have investigators that deal with that. We absorbed the Wethersfield Police Department in June of this year, and we've taken over. We're a full service law enforcement agency. And there's, of course, been lots of growing pains, but that's where we are. So, when you talk about difficulties we've had, I kind of view this almost as a startup. Now, we date back to 1781, but I took over an agency that's completely different than the one we're running today, other than in name. I rebranded. It was very important for me to rebrand the agency because I think the image of sheriffs in Vermont was kind of the bottom of the barrel, low-end kind of rental law enforcement. And now I think we've obviously always have a long ways to go, but we're now a modern professional law enforcement agency that the communities that we serve, I think, are pretty happy with the quality of service that they're receiving. So, but when you have exponential growth, there's always going to be issues with the back end keeping up with the front end. You know, we've had anonymous complaints about the finances of the department. We're just going through and wrapping up a mandatory audit that happens every 2 years at sheriff's departments. You know, some issues with paperwork, getting somebody's not certification, but their oath filed with the county clerk. I mean, little stuff that at the end of the day, it's mine. I own it. Anything that goes wrong there, it's my name on the side of the car. It's me. I own that. But these are all lessons that I think we've been able to take and grow and realize that there's always things you can work on. But I think at the end of the day, they're kind of bumps in the road when you compare to, like we've talked about. I'm incredibly proud of like the law enforcement, not just the law enforcement, but the community service type things that we've done. We work really hard. Food insecurity. My grandmother Marcy, going back to this, ran the food shelf in Windsor for many years, right? And so food insecurity has kind of been a thing that's always in the back of my mind. We've done, and again, not enough because really there's not enough you can do, but we've worked with we've done 2 community dinners here with Mary McNaughton and the wonderful things she does.
I was at one of them. It was really nice. Yeah.
And then we work with Windsor County Youth Services, who have some kids that are in state custody, and we try to go there once a quarter. It's been a little while, but we go and feed them and have, you know, a homemade dinner and sit down with these kids. So a lot of those things that we do, we've been working on getting people rides to rehab or court, because if you don't have resources, you know, for you and I, even if our car was broke down, there's 100 people we could call to give us a ride, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes when folks are in a really tough position, something as simple as getting a ride up the street. So we've done all those things. We've really excelled, I think, turning this place around and being involved in significant law enforcement cases and all that. I know we're getting a little short on time, but I hope that kind of touches at what you're...
It does. I was looking, my timer stopped for some reason, but maybe you have a magnetic field. Too. But one of the things I'll comment is I think that I don't follow very closely, although I do follow you on like Facebook and Instagram. As sheriff, you've been very kind of out there in terms of communications, both the successes or the actions and even the challenges that you mentioned, just kind of be out in front of that. And so it seems like communication's a big part of, or an emphasis for you with the public.
Yeah, I think it's important if you're going to have legitimacy in your community. So I just got back from a 3-month in-residence course at the University of Louisville at the Southern Police Institute Administrative Officers course, and I'm very proud to have been accepted and gone to this course. It's one of the probably top 3 most prestigious law enforcement leadership courses in the country. So, but one of the things we learned and talked about there is like legitimacy within your community, and open and honest communication with your community. I think so much of that it doesn't get done in a lot of other places, right? You can see where like it just, and that's where you have some failures, especially when we see this on the national level where, you know, if you just would have handled it better, been open and honest with your community and up front. And I think it also connects us to the community more. And there's sometimes maybe I get a little too sassy on some of the comments, but that's been a priority for me, is to build a relationship with our community, whether it's here in Windsor or the greater Windsor County community. And I think it's a good way to have insight on what the problems are. Like social media, it's its own beast, but it is a little bit of a litmus test for what's going on in your community, that ground truth.
Well, since we're talking about community, and that's one of the emphasis of the show, is, you know, I want to have conversations about why is community important, you know, what's it mean to you? And I know you're on the select board and you've been active in other ways. The Windsor County Sheriff is, you know, supporting community dinners and things like that. But what does community mean to you, and why is it important?
in thinking about like how to answer to this, I'm not sure that I can even articulate it, but what it means to me. So yesterday, somebody had asked me to marry them. I'm just as the peace, forgot to throw that out there, and having somebody reach out and say, hey, we'd like you to marry us in this very intimate ceremony, and people that I've known, for many years, but not really well, and to be involved into that, to be part of that, it's kind of sacred moment, to drive by the golf course and see Mr. Hankson out there doing his thing, and remember when I was in 3rd grade and he said, hey, don't quit football this season and I'll buy you a pizza, which I just hit Bob up the other day. He does owe me a cheese pizza. But those things where I don't know that I can even say it in words, but you can kind of feel it in your heart, and walking down, Moon Dance, for example, Autumn Moon Festival, seeing all those kids' faces where I'm handing out stickers and they're taking, the bars and the cruiser and all these things. And that's what it means to me, walking down the street or having somebody like you that I've looked up to and you reach out to me and say, hey, I want to have you on my TV show. It's your heart, it's part of your being, going across the street from my house and walking through Paradise Park, and it's just part of your being. And I think, last year when the soccer and field hockey teams won the state championships, we were involved. We did the little parade around town, and seeing those lights flashing and people on the corners hooting and hollering, and I blocked traffic at an intersection and see the whole parade go around, and that's what it means, right? It's that feeling you get in your heart, and I think we're blessed in Windsor because it's such a tight community. There's so many connections, and I don't know that really anywhere else in the Upper Valley we have what we have here in Windsor. And like I said, I don't know. I feel bad because I can't really articulate it more than that. It's just like a feeling for me.
Well, I think it's about humanity, right, and connecting with each other, and we do that by mixing, and so I think that's one of the things that, I'm hoping that we can promote on this show, and just in our involvement in the community, is to have people do that more, because we're at a time where, I think there's a lot of social isolation or polarization, and I think when we come together and get to know each other better, it lessens some of that.
Absolutely, and we're so, the communities, or the country as a whole is so divisive right now. And like you're saying, if you kind of break down those walls and just realize that, hey, we're all just people trying to get along. And a lesson that hit me very young, I don't know how old I was. I turned 23 on a plane heading into Iraq, but I had some opportunity there for a couple of weeks to interact with local nationals on a construction project on the base. And it clicked to me that these are just construction workers. These are just regular guys. They happen to be Iraqi because they were born in Iraq, but they weren't any different than any of these guys that were on a job site with my dad, or I did a construction detail with the blue, and that kind of clicked to me that if we kind of tear down those walls and interact more, you go back to, I'm pretty sure that you had a TV show with another local famous celebrity for many years on this same channel. But, you put two guys that are kind of, and that's Mr. David Taft, you put two guys that might have kind of polar opposite views on certain things, and you get them in a room and talk, and you realize that maybe we're not that different. And so I think it's super important. I know you got some select board questions on there, and we're kind of running out of time.
Maybe touch on that quick, and then we are running out of time here, but you've been on the select board, and what are a couple of the things that pressing issues right now? And I know that you'll be hiring a new town manager pretty soon. I would probably assume that's one of them.
Yeah, I think when we look at what are pressing issues in the town of Windsor, right? Somewhat unique to us is that we need a new town manager. And I don't say that like we need to oust Tom, but he's ready to retire. So, we have to hire a new town manager. With that said, every one of our department heads is going to be done, I suspect, within the next 5 years, right? So that's going to be very important. I think the timeline's actually probably more condensed with that. So that's incredibly important. you look at affordability in Vermont and the unsustainability of the path that we're on just as a whole. When you look at what you're paying for your property taxes, and in Windsor, the town only makes up about half of that bill. You know, on a $10,000 bill, we're about $5,000 roughly. In the schools, the other half. In other communities, it's different. It's 20/80, but that is going to be the biggest challenge in the next 5 years here. How do we stay somewhat affordable?
Right.
I think we really have to strongly look at regionalization of services. We're a very small town that has a very big budget for what we have. And I'm not saying it's not needed, because the demand for services, this is something you dealt with when you were on the board 20 years ago. The demand of services in this town is so great. But, and Tom's touched on this a little bit, do we share positions regionally? Do we look at, you know, either, and I think from my perspective, seeing regional law enforcement, not in a town like Windsor per se, but some of these other smaller towns, regional fire services, EMS, all these things, we have to take a look. Even highway, do we regionalize? And I think there's got to be a balance between, no, we don't need state regionalization, but smaller conglomerates of towns, or even at the county level, because, you know, an average working family paying $10,000, $12,000 in property taxes,
So it's sustainable.
with a 5-10% increase every year, you get to the point where it literally just is not affordable to live in Vermont. And I think that's a big challenge.
Well, certainly commend you for being on Select Board. I know what it's like, and it's an important role. It's sometimes often thankless, but you know, thank you for doing that. So we're going to wrap this up, and I want to just hear, do you have any concluding comments, words of wisdom you'd like to share with the Windsor area community?
No, I think just the one thing that kind of clicks in my head is that you know, I'm very involved and touch a lot of different things in society, and I think it just, you know, don't get so focused on what you read on the internet or what people are trying to force you to believe. Think about your neighbors and your friends and your family, and try to make your space better, whatever that is. You know, whether it's your home, your local community, your state, whatever. Focus on what you can do to make the world a better place. And I think we're going to be a lot better off if we all kind of take a deep breath, maybe pull back a little bit from social media, and just try to make the world a better place. And I know it sounds kind of pie in the sky, but I think if we all took a deep breath and kind of took a little bit of that with us every day, I think we could solve a lot more of these problems. So
That's great advice. You know, I'll do our part. So, well, thank you, Ryan, or I should say Sheriff Palmer.
No, it's Ryan.
For coming on
Thank
the
you,
show.
sir. Appreciate it very
And,
much.
Look forward to staying in touch here. And
Absolutely.
thanks for everything
Thank
you do.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.